I was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. I was sentenced to 15 years to life. So I ended up doing 20 years, 8 months for a crime I did not commit. When you have truth, and truth is something that is not just coming from here, but it's truth that resides right here, it doesn't really matter who believes what. As long as you have strength to get out of the bed in the morning, you have a fight on your hands and you have to keep pushing. My life was normal as any other 16-year-old kid. I was born and raised in the Bronx, two-parent household. My mom was a registered nurse and my dad was a contractor. He worked very well with his hands. At the time that this happened, he was visiting his mom in Jamaica because I believe they had had a hurricane or something like that, maybe a couple months before then in 1988. So he went to go check on his mom. My mom and myself, we stayed in the house. I was just going back to school after the holiday break, and she was just starting a 2-week vacation. The day started normal, get me up for school, I get dressed, I eat, and I leave out. I leave her on the couch, and we're laughing because I hadn't, really had an interest in a lot of schooling as of late. And I said, it's not that the work is hard. I'll finish the work and we'll get through this. And we laughed about it, and I went to school. I came back that afternoon. When I came back, I noticed that the car wasn't in the driveway. So being that she was just starting a 2-week vacation, I'm assuming that she's out doing a bit of shopping or something. And as I'm coming into the house, I can hear the phone ring. Grab the phone. I'm kind of in the doorway. And it was a girlfriend of mine at the time who said, well, did I want to come by? So I said, okay, great. My mom's not home. I can go there, and by the time I come back, she should be back home. I returned back home maybe about 5:30, and I noticed the car was still gone. So I said, okay, she's still out. 5:30 in the winter in New York, it's dark outside. So, I'm like, all right, well, she should be back any moment now. I went in, took off my coat, dropped my bag and things, and I'm walking towards my bedroom in the back. And I noticed that my parents' bedroom, the door is ajar. And that wasn't something that was a normal occurrence. And I just, out of curiosity, like, what's going on? I happened to go into the room, and that's where I had found my mom. She was face down on the bed. I didn't know what was wrong. I immediately ran to grab the telephone that was in the bedroom to call the police and call for help. But when I picked up the phone, I noticed that the cord for the phone was not there. So it was just the base of the phone and then the phone itself, because they had taken the cord from the telephone and bound her wrist with it. I ran out into the hallway. I called the police from there, and I ran downstairs to just make sure that they wouldn't pass the house. Everything from that point when officers came, it's just like a blur. It's like you're just seeing people back and forth, and you hear the chatter of radios, and they asked me my whereabouts for the day. I told them where I was at, told them everything that I had done. They asked me if I noticed that anything was out of place. I told them, I said, well, her car is not here. I don't know where her car is. It was here when I left this morning. They took me from there to a godmother's house of mine who lived not too far from me. I could not sleep. I probably slept in 15, 20-minute intervals. I couldn't really eat or hold food down. Finally, on the 5th, the officers called my godmother and said that they wanted to bring me back down to the precinct for a polygraph test. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't even want to move. But I wanted to know what happened. My mom, so reluctantly, I was like, all right, let's go. And we go down there, and I had never been inside of a precinct before. I'd never been in the back of a police car. I'd never been questioned by police before. So I don't know any of this. And they're telling me things that we have evidence that's saying you did this. I'm sitting there, I'm crying, I'm asking for my dad. I'm saying, no, I didn't do this. This goes on for hours. Finally, they tell me that the girlfriend that I went to go see, she was 2.5 years younger than me. And if I didn't tell them that I did this, not only was I going to go to jail for that, but I was also going to go to jail for statutory rape. Never heard the term before. And they said, well, but if you do, We'll make sure that you don't go to prison for that. And we'll have your dad come and pick you up from family court because we know that this was an accident. And the amount of time that I was in there, the only thing that I wanted to do was get out of that room. Anything that they would have told me to say to get out of that room, I would have said. So eventually, after hours of that, they coerced me into making this elaborate confession that would be proven later was totally nonsense and could not have possibly happened. They didn't take into consideration, it's like, okay, this is a 16-year-old kid who just came and witnessed his mom, face down on the bed. It's like, even now at 48 years old, you still cannot get the image out of your head. And, it's, for me, I'm going back to my 16-year-old self. Anything anyone would have told me to do then, I would have probably done it, So that set off, again, a whole 20-year ordeal in prison. So I ended up doing 20 years, 8 months. My dad, he had died in 2005. The last I saw him was 2003. They brought him back up to the country because the healthcare in Jamaica for what he needed wasn't good. So they had to fly him back up to the States. But when they flew him back up to the States, they brought him up to the prison to see me. And Alzheimer's had ravaged him. He didn't know who I was. So, and every time I think about it, it's like it really does something to me, because I'm saying, wow, we just fought the last 13 years together, and you don't even know who I am now. And you're feeling like I'm alone because you were the one who was fighting with me, went through everything. And when I wasn't strong, I would lean on you, and vice versa. So that for me, kind of was like, let me know, okay, you're alone, but you have to fight. You cannot allow them to let you lay down. You have to fight. So watching my dad go through everything he went through, I got a strength from that, because I would look at a man who didn't have much by way of traditional education, but big spirit. And I would lean on that. And when I lost him, it was like, you cannot lay down. Even if you're not as strong, you cannot lay down, because he didn't sacrifice everything for you to just come this far and say, okay, well, it's all done. It had been writing people and different organizations to say, okay, listen, I'm innocent, can somebody take a look at this? Not knowing much about law. My dad really didn't know much about law either, but we just wanted to do something. So I would take my time in it and write to whomever. There were a lot of organizations that were committed to helping prove the innocence of those who were wrongfully convicted. And I would write them on a regular basis. I would write to investigators to try to get the case reopened, all for naught. Finally, in 2008, some people that I wrote to the Innocence Project, and they forwarded my letter to another law clinic who they felt was better able to deal with my issues in particular. They got in contact with me. I was still inside. And we established a relationship. And as they learned more about the case, they said, wait a minute, there is something here. I was released 2009, a year later after getting them. And they said, well, do you want to continue to fight because you're home? I said, well, this is the only thing I know how to do, and I have to prove my innocence, So that set off another 10-year fight. Finally, in 2016, the attorneys that I had, they kind of gathered everything that they could really get, and they couldn't go anymore. And they contacted the Innocence Project. And from there, things just started to really move. And finally, in 2019, I was exonerated. Innocence Project, they are lawyers. They are my friends. They are a group who are committed to righting the wrongs of the criminal justice system, fighting for those who have been wrongfully convicted, and helping people to make sure that when they are free, that their transition back to society is a smooth one. I believe the IP, the Innocence Project, to pretty much be a buffer between criminal justice and us. And they are the checks and balances. I'm grateful that I am actually part of that family as well. If we're not holding people accountable, this will continue to keep happening. And when I mean holding them accountable, if people are losing positions, losing their freedom and things like that, people will think twice before, okay, you know that this person is innocent, or you know that you're doing something that is unsavory, that is going to jam this person up. If you know that there are checks and balances after you make that choice, you would probably think twice because you don't want to be found out with what you're doing. For instance, if that stuff was in place with me, a lot of people would be in trouble. I mean, you have officers who have done what they did to me to at least 3 other kids that we know. That's just that we know. So it's like, they have never been held accountable. So as long as they're not held accountable, it's business as usual. The prosecutor in my case, she realized that, okay, I want a conviction. And I think we can get it. We have this statement, and the time and the temperament of New York and the country at that time was, oh, okay, well, he's Black, he made a statement, and he must have done it. So they were able to get a conviction, but the amount of things that she did behind the scenes to hide evidence, to mislead, it's like, you need checks and balances in place. So that's how I advocate. Anytime I get a chance to talk, I'm always talking about holding them accountable and getting something in place where they know I can't do this. Black life, then it was very cheap. It's still, to me, a lot of these people, it's still cheap. But for a lot of Black kids in the inner city, it was very cheap. And the more of us that they could get off of the street, the better. And just to put it in a framework, my case happened January 3rd, 1989. The Central Park 5 case happened April 19th, 1989. 90 days later. And there are more cases that may or may not have made the media, but it's a temperament of the time. So that was standard practice for police in this city at the time. And for all intent and purposes, it still is. A lot of people often ask me, do you feel comfortable talking about it? And I'm saying, no, I have to. Out of all the time that I did, I was inside screaming at the top of my lungs that I was innocent. No one could hear. Now people are saying, we want to hear what you have to say. So I don't care if it's a 4th grader. I don't care if it's an 8-year-old. I don't care if it's a senior. If you want to talk to me, no, let's talk, because for years, no one could hear me. There is definitely life after prison, and that prison does not define who and what you're going to become. The situations are what they are. You ultimately decide how you're going to come out and function and live. You define who you are after that, based on what you've gone through, the type of compassion, and how much you've tapped into your own humanity.